All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here for the January 14th, 2026 meeting of the Active Transportation Advisory Committee. All right, I got recording going perfect. Just quick hybrid meeting guidelines for the folks online. Please mute your microphone unless you are specifically making a comment. You can have your camera on or off. At this time, I'll be the only one seeing those cameras that are on. There's the raise hand function if you have a question at any point, or you can always chime up. And this meeting is being recorded and streamed to the Transportation Council's YouTube page. If folks online could also put your name and affiliation in the chat, I'll read those off in just a minute when we get to the introductions. But first, we'll go through our agenda real quick. We have a bit of an atypical meeting today. We're going to start with our discussion items, which will be pretty brief. And then instead of a feature presentation like we usually do, we're going to be doing a screening of the documentary From Rails to Trails, which is a history of the Rails to Trails Conservancy and the movement to convert old rail lines into trails. This is something that was shown at the PTNY Greenways conference in October. I thought it was very interesting, so I thought this group would be interested in that documentary as well. So we'll begin with introductions here in the room. I'm Ethan Townsend, Transportation Planner with the Capital Region Transportation Council. One of the activities I lead is active transportation, including facilitating this group. We'll go this way to Ivan first.
Ivan Vamos, New York Bicycling Coalition.
Scott Miller, on my own and as a rep for the Circuit of the Plan Trails Committee.
Valerie Dean, New York State DOT Region 1.
John Mitchell, Town of Half Moon, Trails and Open Space Committee, Champlain Canal Way Trail Group. Oh, and my wife, Gail.
Linda Vonderheader, Principal Planner in Mercer County.
I'm Chris Morris with New York State Parks. I manage our state's trails program, which also includes oversight of the Empire State Trail, website, and partner coordination.
Great. And then online joining us, we have James Rath with Capital Streets, Charles Welch with the Albany County Department of Health, Dave Wooden, Planning Director for the town of Waterford. We also have Amy Lawlick, Ethan Warren with CDTA, and then from the Transportation Council, we have Martin Hull, Parker Morris, Leah Rye, and Thomas Houlihan from Rensselaer as well. All right, we will now move into our discussion items, which, like I mentioned, will be pretty quick today. The first one is that the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee posters are out for the year. There they are up on the screen for those of you who are in person. We do have a couple here. If you are interested in one, it's good safety for helmets, and then also to just encourage people to make sure you're biking with the appropriate equipment. They're pretty large, but we can get one for you for the folks who are online if you want one, or like I said, anyone in person, you're welcome to take one of the ones we have here today as you're on your way out. The next quick update is about the Dunn Memorial Bridge bike and pedestrian path, which has been closed recently for renovations to harden the existing alternative path. Real quick, let me.
It's one project that
who just joined. Perfect. All right. So the path's been reopened. What was done? So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there used to be a standalone kind of bridge path that led up to the Dunn, so then you could cross. That was closed several years ago due to poor condition, and then a alternate path that was kind of its own little separated lane within the drive lane on the Dunn was set up, but it was not very comfortable to use as someone who used it myself. So DOT has been doing some work. They added new steel fencing and glare screens, updated the ramps, and then the crosswalk where you cross. Actually, what's the street there? Canal Street, maybe. The one that's right next to 787. So you can get up to the ramp. There's been additional pavement and curb improvements. They had to shift the traffic a bit to accommodate a slightly wider path than they had at the time. And then there's also plans to add future items to make sure accommodations were available for those. The work is ongoing still. There's still some finishing touches. But those are scheduled to be finished by the end of January. We all know how these things go. It might go a little longer, but the path is reopened at this time. Valerie, anything else to add about it?
Nope, you covered that pretty well.
Perfect.
When I was there, a lot of stuff wasn't quite in yet, but work was ongoing. I could see the workers there and yes, it's quite street.
Sweet. Um. Next thing, TAP solicitation. So for those of you who don't know, the Transportation Alternatives Program is a federal funding program for specifically for projects that are to provide transportation alternatives to single occupancy vehicles. So this is one of the main fund sources for bike and pedestrian related projects. It's administered by New York State. Pre-review applications are due tomorrow. So if you haven't started, it might be a bit late. But for anyone who's working on a solicitation or working on an application, you just want to make sure you get those in by tomorrow. The final applications will then be due on March 12th. Projects are going to be scored on a variety of things. The MPO will be included in that scoring process for projects in the region. Projects will be scored on the project benefits, the alignment with the TAP program, and then also there's a scoring section about how the project is going to be managed, which are all things that are asked about in the application process.
Where's that picture?
Oh shoot, where did I find that picture?
I'm guessing that's probably the Maybrook.
That sounds right. I pulled it
From the
from,
only rails and trails around.
yeah, I was
That
just
would be
looking
that
through
new.
our list of pictures in our archive, but I can find specifically where it was for you after this. So that's the TAP program. Our local planning initiatives, updates on those, everything is kind of moving along as scheduled. Nothing has been finished, and we're getting a couple projects off the ground. We have our regular community planning support, so the Route 109 study in Half Moon, the Route 7 study in Niskuna, Village of Ballston Spa's traffic calming master plan. That's one of the ones that's really kind of getting going now. The West Avenue complete street study in city of Saratoga Spring, also the REI, just letters were due, so those are being scored. For the Tech Assist program, we're pretty close to completing the Cohoes parking study. The Albany County Active Transportation Technical Assistance Program is one that's being led by Carrie Ward and myself. That's specifically looking at possibility of adding sidewalks on Russell Road and then some multi-use trails around the Albany Airport. So that's probably the one that's most directly related to this group that's getting going. We just executed the contract for that the other day, so hopefully we will get it going soon. So keep an eye out for any public meetings if you're interested in that project. We have the EV Tech Assist for the city of Albany that's going on. Tech Assist for the Albany County Airport, looking at realigning access to make it traffic flow better, but also safer for pedestrians and cyclists with the multi-use path that runs near the airport. North Greenbush, Blooming Grove, always stop analysis, just some safety things we're working on with North Greenbush, and then City of Watervliet signal analysis, kind of same thing, safety related. We then have the large projects that we have been involved with to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the project, that are ongoing. 378 Pell, the 890 Pell, the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan, which is complete. We're working on implementation, and then the ADA self-evaluation plans that we're always doing with communities, and Reimagine 787, which is obviously a large scale project that is ongoing. So those are the regional planning initiatives, and that is all discussion items I had today. So now moving to the participant updates section. I know Ivan wanted to speak for a minute about the Little River project in Manan, so I'll turn it over to Ivan.
Yes. Let me go through about 2 minutes of background. Circa 2001, three of us, Ron Miller from Manans, engineer Paul Reese, and I had put together 3 projects that would get Manans access to the riverfront, which was completely cut off by I-787. This was way before Reimagine 787 came in. Fortunately, CDTC at the time had given us very good support of our proposals. Regional office, Sam Zhu and others had helped in fact, improve on some of our, and make, even with a slight increase in expense, improve some of our projects, and two of the three had been completed. One, the reopening of the bridge from South Troy to Menands, along with access down to the Riverfront Trail and through that into Watervliet and other places. The second one was at a interchange that was at Ward's Lane. And that was mainly done with some traffic marking changes along the routes. So by and large, oversized systems were made to work both for pedestrians and bicyclists and for regular traffic as that particular interchange accommodates. So 2 out of 3 done. Third one was more difficult. It was a vision of reopening internal waterway along with bike pedestrian route, with it at a place where culverts were instituted instead of the waterway itself. Fortunately, this was picked up and supported by the Reimagine 787 work. That was good news. Bad news is they had also put a pretty high price estimate on how this would be done. We had very little background on that. I as a volunteer from NYBC, but a committee has been working in Menands with a grant from the Hudson Greenway to look at ways of accessing the Little River, assuming that this bridge opening would be a possibility. We are requesting that a presentation be made, probably by the engineer working from our consultant. His name is Matt Rogers, and that would be at the next meeting, April 8th. And we will be arguing, as we did in our original proposal, that if a project comes up to design, replace, increase the culverts that currently carry the Little River, that a bridge project be considered as an alternative. I will particularly argue that the culvert projects are not long for this world because of changes in rainfall occurrences and sea level rise and other issues. But we then hope that CRTC will consider opening up a alternate design project for culverts in case culverts need to be replaced or get sufficiently damaged by a natural occurrence. So that's our request. And I have information here. I can stay after this to talk to people about that project.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
Like you said, we'll try and get that, feature presentation about the Little River project for our April meeting. So
Hey,
everyone
thank you for
stay
that.
tuned for that. Yep. Any
Hey.
other updates from anyone in the room or anyone online have anything to say about, that project? Sounds like James chiming up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Ivan if there were upcoming meetings with that working group that, are open to join. I'd be interested to, I know we spoke a little bit about this project, but it would be interesting to learn a little bit more on what you guys are working on.
Just to make it brief, we have been meeting regularly with village representatives, some of the people coming in from the town occasionally, other interests, and the project we will be presenting will be showing how access to the Little River would be made and improvements that would go with it. So we hope that presentation would be a chance to have that discussion that you're looking for. I
Okay,
can try to
thank
go
you.
over the details if needed.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else have anything about this Little River project or any other updates from there?
I give you an update. The RFP for the engineering feasibility study for the trail connector between Freeman's Bridge and Ralston Lake has been issued. There'll be a selection of contractor in February. And hopefully they'll start that feasibility study this summer.
Awesome.
Who bid that out? Who's leading it? Is that the county?
It's it's a hard. I don't know that I can give you a clear answer to that. It's a joint project between Cerritos County, Schenectady County, Metroplex, town of Boston, town of Clifton Park, and town of Glenville. I believe that the RFP has been issued by Cerritos County with a handshake agreement for cost sharing between Metroplex and Cerritos.
Where can people go to find the RFP?
Send me a message. I'll get it to you.
Great. If anyone needs Scott's contact information, I'll just reach out to me and I'll pass you along. James, raise your hand. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, just a separate kind of issue I wanted to bring up. Not necessarily an update, but it's winter time right now. Things are looking pretty clear, fortunately. But for over a week, there are just a lot of inaccessible pieces of infrastructure that are pretty critical to the active transportation network. So I wanted to flag it with this group and see if, I know CRTC has that really great sidewalk map showing, who's responsible for sidewalks in communities. But especially, the trail connections, getting over the Hudson River. I know here in Troy, both the 378 bridge and the Congress Street Bridge were completely, unpassable, inaccessible for over a week. Obviously the Dunn is going over or has some construction happening too, but this is kind of an ongoing trend every winter time whenever we experience snow and ice. So I know that there are some long-standing agreements between DOT and local communities on who is supposed to maintain the bridges specifically. It's not only the bridges that's a problem, but I think that's some of the most important and high visibility challenges. So yeah, I wanted to flag that and see if there's any discussion between DOT and communities about improving the maintenance of these pieces of infrastructure. Excuse me. Yeah, more of a hopeful discussion. Sorry, I
Yeah,
also lost power, so I'm on my phone and
That's all right.
random.
Still sound good. Yeah, thanks for bringing up that's a good point, especially about the bridges, the Hudson River bridges. We only have so many of them, and they're hard for cyclists and pedestrians even at the best of time. I haven't been familiar with any discussions going on regarding the maintenance. Valerie, have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything specific. I can ask when I get back to the office.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Then yeah, if you could let me know, I can pass any information along to the group. But yeah, the clearing of facilities is definitely an issue every year in every community. Something
Yeah,
that-
it seems. Sorry to.
No, you're good.
I was just gonna say, it seems like it's time for a refresher on who's actually responsible, and
Yeah.
then after that's identified, like, is it actually happening? Because I think more times than not, the answer is no. I just had an experience recently where I tried to get to the train station to catch a train using the trail, and the 378 bridge was completely covered in ice, and I had to turn around and run back, and fortunately had a vehicle that I could use that day. But a lot of people don't have that access. So yeah, I think figuring it out,
Yeah.
just to put it bluntly, is long overdue. I think every year we've kind of experienced this sort of thing. Unfortunately, it takes snow falling to bring it to our attention. But yeah, hopefully we can work together on that. Valerie, I'd love to help in any way I can to facilitate that conversation or dive into the jurisdiction.
Yeah, and on the transportation council side, you mentioned our sidewalk clearance policy map. We could probably also do some mapping efforts to identify some of those critical pieces of active transportation infrastructure, and on our end, document who is responsible for that maintenance and find contact information that we can have on our end when someone does bring a problem for a specific area. So we'll look into that on our end.
Yeah, that would be excellent. We've on our end at Capital Streets, we've been talking about potentially having a map that shows the status. We get a lot of feedback from community members about the status of the trails. So we can try to present some of that as well. But that would be really helpful, Ethan.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you later. All right. Anyone else? Yeah.
Couple short updates. I'll be brief. New York State Parks is just in the beginning phases. We did a 2021 Greenway Trails plan for the state. Some may remember that. The legislation that established that requires a 5-year update. So we're starting the process of that update right now. It's going to be, really an update report. It'll be relatively concise, but we are going to have public input. We'll have a map that folks can add or comment on the existing trail network for updates to that. So keep an eye out, and we'll be announcing that and the public input opportunities for that and partner input opportunities. This spring, last year, I know that bike etiquette, bike ped etiquette, electric bike etiquette, those types of things are really prominent in a lot of people's worlds. Parks did an Empire State Trail etiquette video that we put out, kind of a promotional thing. We'll be releasing that again this spring as kind of a reminder. And then just really preliminary stages as well. It's kind of as a result of the Dunn Memorial work. With the Dunn Memorial changes happening and, that pedestrian connection going away permanently and, the temporary solution meant to just be temporary. We're in initial talks with DOT for the Livingston Avenue Bridge, multi-use path that's there, and, it's very likely that that will be the long-term Empire State Trail route to go across there through Rensselaer and so, that's our goal at least. I think everybody agrees it makes a lot of sense. It'll be an exciting new kind of project and connection for that, but, we've got a meeting with DOT to start that process. It's really basically signage, so it's very small compared to the, you know, whatever it is, $3 billion bridge that's going in. But
And just to circle back something you said about the, you know, the e-bike etiquette in
Mhm.
particular, is something we're increasingly hearing about at the Transportation Council. So, in our 2026 planning work program, we're specifically calling out compiling educational materials for municipalities, both, you know, what the laws are, what options are to help kind of control some of this dangerous behavior that we're seeing increasingly with e-bikes. So we don't have anything solid on that now, but this next year, we're gonna be putting a lot of emphasis on those e-bikes in particular.
along those lines too, so, I'll try to keep it high level, but we have, we are the, kind of manager of the recreational trail program funds from Federal Highway through DOT to parks. We release those grants. We put out a new grant opportunity this fall. It's kind of, baby steps of releasing it, but it's going to be this way likely going forward. We kept them, it's for the safety and education portion that RTP has. It's like very small amount.
Mhm.
It's a few $100,000 of the 1.9 million we get. We worked with partners and tried to identify the best way to spend those monies in the past, but now that opportunity is out to the public. It's actually on our website now, so specific for safety and education around trail use. So that would be for local munis or, you know, CRPC or whomever. You know, there's a money opportunity there to either do materials, education, those types of things. Etiquette is certainly eligible for that.
Cool, that's really good to know.
I think with the snowmobile trails, they had the funding, so like police departments could buy snowmobiles if something, because there's, I mean, if you have a trail system, having the police get on the trail system and you hit the cars in there, things like that.
Yeah, there's some nuances with that. You actually can't buy equipment to use on the trail for that purpose. You could use for maintenance, you can. That's why we fund a lot of snowmobile groomers with RTP in the
Yep,
winter.
yep.
But this one is a smaller amount specifically for like trailhead information, brochures, that types of things.
Education, more education.
Yeah, it's a specific safety and education apportionment for the funding.
Awesome.
I think there's just like cars speeding, things like that, if there's not cops stopping people, it's like, they're gonna keep on doing it. And I think there's gonna be that issue with the e-bikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Need both, yeah,
Absolutely.
education and enforcement.
yeah.
If there's no, if you're not gonna get in trouble, why bother?
Yeah.
I can send you a link for that.
Yes, that'd be
That
great.
opportunity. I'll
We'll
make a note
include
right
that.
now. Yeah.
Include that in our meeting minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, then my last appearance here, I talked about the Mechanicsville Central Avenue. Which is, really basically when 146 in Half Moon, you know, ends there. And, both Kevin Tolson in Half Moon and Mayor Butler are happy with the idea, and they seem to be going on, and it could in fact end up being a redirection of the Empire State Trail, because there's no reason for the Empire State Trail to go up Main Street when Central Avenue is there. And James, your people with the you hit that. They had this assessment process, and Valerie, you had a couple of people there that took the assessment. Get any feedback from them?
I don't remember specifically what we
Yeah.
discussed after that. I know that since we did the paving project here, we can't
Yeah.
touch it,
Yeah.
that portion immediately.
Yeah. But the thing is, the Capital Roots came in and just did a wonderful presentation, which would maybe be a presentation that could be brought here at some time. But it was just really very, very thorough about what to look at on a sidewalk and, a crossing, what are the elements that alternative transportation needs to have? And, as I say, it was just wonderful. I was very pleased.
Awesome. That's really great to hear. Make myself a note about that. Great. Anyone else in person or online? Any updates? Going once, going twice. All right, then we'll be moving along to our last little thing on the agenda, which is just our upcoming meetings. We have our 2026 meetings scheduled, which since you're all here, you're probably all getting my emails. Charles Weld is interested in some of those posters. I will reach out to you after this meeting to help get some of those posters. And again, if anyone else wants some of those traffic safety posters, just let me know. For 2026, our meetings are going to be April 8th, July 8th, and October 21st, each of which is a Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. And as always, they'll also be streamed on Zoom and on YouTube and available on the Transportation Council's YouTube page. After the fact, apparently not everyone knows that, as will reach out to me, and so direct them to those meeting recordings, always available. Now we will move on to our featured documentary, From Rails to Trails, which I introduced earlier. Let me get this pulled up. It is narrated by Ed Norton, so if you're a big fan of Fight Club or of The Hulk, you're in for a treat. Someone online, once we get this started, if you can't hear the sound, please chime up quickly. I think you'll be able to hear, but just in case you can't. I think we can dim the lights in this room, so I think I'll try and mess with that in a sec once we get this going.
Coming up,
I'll mute our mic here in
most unlikely movements.
Please chime up with any issue.
The fight to convert abandoned railroads to trails.
There's no way of getting something as terrific as a trail without putting some work into it.
A movement that met roadblocks at every turn.
They legalized the theft of our property.
What does that trail mean for communities that have been there for decades?
Sparking political battles from small towns.
That is prime real estate.
To the nation's capital.
I knew nobody else would do it if I didn't.
A movement that changed America 1 mile at a time.
Certainly the beginning of a course correction, but even now there's a long way to go.
I'm Edward Norton, and this is the story of a national transformation from rails to trails.
Major funding for From Rails to Trails is provided by the Speedwell Foundation, with additional funding from the Lawrence and Lillian Solomon Foundation, Laura H. Richards, Crawford Taylor Foundation, Peter Goldman and Martha Kongsgaard, Conine Family Foundation, Charles and Marshall, Tone Family Fund, Vermont Tourism, and the following.
This is the old train station, or train depot.
For a century, this South Texas rail yard was alive with freight workers and the rumble of locomotives bound for the Mexico border.
So as trains came in and eventually crossed over into Mexico, they would switch out the cars.
The yard fell silent in 2003, and the rail corridor, like so many others across America, was soon abandoned.
It has been abandoned for many years, waiting for a purpose.
That is prime real estate. That doesn't mean we put a road over it. That means we protect it.
In 2004, the county dropped a bombshell. It wanted to convert Brownsville's old railroad into a toll road.
It was going to have at least 3 to 4 lanes, and it was parallel and very close to an existing freeway.
What is the motivation for a road when so many people don't want it?
Why did we need 2 freeways going to the same place, adjacent and parallel to each other? So right after I was elected, the director came to my office, put a big map up on the wall and said, "Look at that. Isn't that a lovely corridor begging for a road?" And I said, well, that may be what you see, but as a physician, I look at that and say, look at that. Isn't it a beautiful corridor for a trail where people could have access to activity every day? Brownsville is a poor area with very low access to health care. We have 1 in 3 that are diabetic as opposed to 1 in 10 on a national average. 80% of our people are either obese or overweight. Those are hard facts.
Hello, everybody. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
The people of Brownsville began to organize, calling themselves Friends of the West Rail Trail.
That trail will cost maybe $10 to $12 million. Toll road is $180 million.
They gathered together in living rooms and church buildings and school cafeterias and spoke about how they weren't going to accept this.
Lucky for the people of Brownsville, they did not have to blaze an entirely new trail. For the past half-century, Americans have been fighting similar battles across the country. A committed core of activists have converted 26,000 miles of old rails into trails.
There's no way of getting something as terrific as a trail without putting some work into it. It didn't just fall into place. People worked hard for it. First, you have to realize that you have an abandoned railroad track in your community. Then you have to find out that it's not being used. Then you have to bring it out to the public to discuss. Of course, lots of people say, this is a terrible idea. I don't want to spend tax money on the trail. So then you have to build your momentum.
Please do what's right and let this be a natural, car-free trail. It is cheaper, it is safer, cleaner, and it is better for everyone. Thank you.
In Brownsville, organizers went door to door collecting signatures.
And showed up at the city commission wheeling a wheelbarrow with 5,000 signatures and said, you know, enough is enough. This is what we want. You are our elected officials and you should listen to us.
Not only me, but 4 of my friends have also been hit by cars biking. 2 of them had to be hospitalized.
New right now, a battle is brewing between the city of Brownsville and Cameron County.
At the center of it all, the Old West Railroad.
Organizers knew they had to play hardball. When a county judge didn't back the trail, they got out the vote for his opponent.
I'm proud to support a West Rail Trail, hike and bike trail only, and I look forward to making it a reality.
They had organized to the point where they were a force to be reckoned with.
It took more than a decade, but the movement finally secured nearly $9 million to convert the old rail line.
When people decide to work together for the betterment of their community and to see that dream become a reality, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
You hear the birds, you see the water, you see the kids playing on it, and you think, this was worth it. Because a road here, you'd be driving fast and you'd miss all of that.
From Hawaii to Maine and points in between, a network of these rail trails crisscrosses the country. It now connects towns that were once linked by trains.
Where 1,000 wheels of freight train doing 90 miles an hour.
It's hard for Americans today to realize how important railroads were to the country. It was just a defining transportation technology. Trains ran everywhere.
From the moment the first regular rail service started in Baltimore in 1830, it was clear this technology would transform the country. American entrepreneurs saw a chance to connect this far-flung country and to make a fortune along the way.
It's like the tech companies today. It's the excitement of what was going on, how to raise money, how to make money, how to get a big return on your investment.
It was more profitable to build railroads than to operate them, thanks to the federal government. It granted the rail companies millions of acres of land.
Since the railroad industry was a private for-profit situation, individual entrepreneurs decided where they wanted to build the tracks.
Intense competition created a chaotic rail building frenzy with no master plan.
It wasn't the government said, we're going to put in tracks here and there. Everybody built their tracks as quickly as they could to try and beat the other guy. There were 7 different routes between Chicago and St. Louis, 9 routes from Chicago to New York. It was very redundant.
As they laid their tracks, they laid claim to the right-of-way, often cutting through private plots, from small farms to sprawling Native American reservations.
They did not have a whole lot of interest in being sensitive to who lived nearby. They just whooshed their line right through.
Along the way, the railroads forever altered the land itself.
Railroads need to maintain a pretty consistent engine speed. They were always looking for routes through the flattest area, and if it wasn't flat enough, they would make it flat by bridging over valleys and cutting through mountains. Now you can see here, the hillside goes way up here, and if the railroad hadn't cut this out, we'd have to be way up there or way up there. Their engineering was unbelievable. Here's this beautiful brick-lined tunnel. They cut a tunnel through the mountain. This trail that we're on actually goes uphill for miles, but the railroad smoothed out the grade so evenly that you can hardly feel that you're going uphill.
These smooth surfaces would eventually lend themselves to another form of transportation. When the bicycle arrived on the scene, it too demanded smooth surfaces.
As you can see, the American streets are very bad. You have the potholes when they took them outside with the narrow steel tires and the deplorable roads that we had. It just was not a happy marriage.
So bicyclists became a politically organized bunch, fighting for better roads and for the right to ride on them. It was called the Good Roads Movement.
If you formed a group and looked like you belonged on the street, you had some authority. So they would dress in military garb, uniform hats to establish some presence on the streets.
The bicyclists, which were basically more urban people that wanted to go out of town into the countryside and ride their bicycles, said, come on, we need better roads than this.
Bicyclists were paving the way for another form of transportation.
It looked like a buggy, only it had no shafts for a horse to be harnessed to. The street was never the same again.
The automobile became the totally dominant force in America. When motor vehicles came in, the motor vehicle industry took over the good roads movement, and it became a car-oriented good roads movement.
The federal government fueled this revolution, much like it had done for the railroads a half a century earlier. As early as 1916, Congress spent $85 million on new roads.
America was so excited about the potential that came with the automobile that it got prioritized over every other form of land use and of transportation. And that came back to bite us.
Trucks started taking a lot of business away from the railroads, and then cars took passenger business away from the railroads. So both of those things really cut into the profitability of the railroads, and some of them started going out of business.
By 1963, nearly 50,000 miles of track across the United States sat abandoned. But trains weren't the only mode of transit that took a back seat to the car. Bicyclists finally had smooth roads, but the streets were choked with intimidating traffic. The bicycle was soon regarded as little more than a child's toy.
When I was a kid here in New York City, bicycles were not used by adults at all. Of course, there was no bike lanes. We were just sort of fitting into the edges of the city, looking over our shoulders if there's room to squeeze by someplace. But for the whole rest of my life, it made me want to find car-free places to bike.
I welcome this opportunity to speak to the people of America about a subject which I believe to be most important, and that is the subject of physical fitness.
In 1962, President John F. Kennedy launched a national campaign to get people out of their cars and into the great outdoors.
I think that mental and physical health, mental and physical vigor go hand in hand.
Automobiles were shrinking the open space, so I think there was this natural yearning to keep open spaces available.
I hope all of you will join in a great national effort.
Tuning in from Rochester, New York, outdoor enthusiast Waldo Nielsen was inspired to hike 50 miles in a single day. To avoid busy roads, Nielsen chose a novel path, one that was practically built for walking.
The corridor is already in place. The hardest work has been done, and the path has been carved. Incredibly smooth, slight grades, accessible to literally anyone.
After a successful journey, Nielsen wanted to pay it forward. Through diligent research, he identified more than 35,000 miles of abandoned railroad tracks across the country. He then published his list in Right of Way.
He wasn't an organizer. He wasn't a political activist. He just thought, let's make a list of all these railroad corridors so that people can walk on them.
Nielsen's book would become a catalyst for a new movement that would reclaim these corridors for the bicyclists and pedestrians who'd been pushed off the road.
Pull up the tracks, pull up the ties, and really, you've got the trail largely made. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to start from scratch.
In the heart of the Midwest, a pioneering naturalist would set this new movement in motion. Her name was May Watts.
She was 70 when I first met her, but she was such an extraordinary person. She just wanted people to be interested in nature and in plants and how everything was interrelated.
She was sort of thinking ahead to how can we protect the spaces that we have left before they're gone.
May Watts made her home west of Chicago, where the open prairie had been devoured by suburban sprawl.
The suburbs were created for people to have more space. But what was happening was, as she calls it, the bulldozers were drooling.
On a trip to England, Watts discovered there was a better way. For centuries, English footpaths had connected people to the nature around them.
If you've been to England, you know that anyone can access these footpaths. What struck her was how everyone could walk the paths together, young, old, and she saw this model for democratic access to nature.
What she saw across the pond would seed an ambitious idea, one that took root in her own backyard.
She was out driving and she crosses the old abandoned C-A&E railroad track. She gets out of the car and she looks down and she says, "This is it."
Along that 50-mile stretch of empty track, Watts found a dormant prairie lying in wait. While agriculture and sprawl had erased most of Illinois' native plants, here along the tracks they were thriving.
When the trains travel on the tracks, the sparks light fires along the railroad bed that propagate the seeds of many of these native plants. It's very similar to a prairie burn.
Watts was struck by a novel idea. What if the old railroad corridor could be converted to a trail?
You didn't have to travel to get to nature. Nature could be right there outside your door.
In the fall of 1963, she penned her now famous letter to the editor of the Chicago Tribune.
We are human beings. We are able to walk upright on 2 feet. We need a footpath. Right now, the right-of-way lies waiting, and many hands are itching for it.
Here is a potential path. This is a proud resource. The time to act is now.
Readers responded in force. Watts quickly attracted a cadre of smart, hardworking volunteers.
It was spearheaded by a group of women. They were community volunteers, they were gardeners, they were mothers.
And their husbands, and then other people that they drew in. And there's a little hardcore group of them that dug in deep.
As the volunteers walked along the idle tracks, they imagined a place of endless possibility. They called it the Illinois Prairie Path. But just as May Watts had warned, private developers and city planners were itching to get their hands on the corridor. Soon, several sections were paved over for parking.
In the Chicago suburbs, it was running through several different counties. The state didn't take the lead on it. The counties were arguing with each other.
I think anytime we think about something like a trail, we understand it to be exquisitely local. But the reality is, the beginning and end of a trail doesn't respect the beginning and end of a county line or a city limit. So there needs to be regional cooperation.
Meanwhile, the power company held a perpetual easement along the corridor, its lines hanging over the proposed path.
They pitched it to Commonwealth Edison that this would be a great PR boom for them in getting this path realized. And if you look at one of the brochures, sure enough, they tout that they were instrumental in helping the Illinois Prairie Path become what it was.
Through sheer force of will, the grassroots group would eventually realize May Watts' vision. But because they hit so many unexpected speed bumps, the Illinois Prairie Path would not earn the title of America's first rail trail. That's because another rail trail was blazing ahead, 200 miles away in Wisconsin.
The property was homesteaded by my great-grandfather. It's unique, and it's beautiful, and I love it. I love being able to talk about my hometown. The beauty of the terrain, it's magical. I may be prejudiced, and I may be a little bit overselling it, but that's too bad. That's Tommy Thompson, and that's what I love about this area.
Halfway between Chicago and Minneapolis, Elroy, Wisconsin was once a significant stop along the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad.
Just think of this, 15 freight trains went through Elroy every single day, and 10 passenger trains.
But in 1964, facing stiff competition from trucks, the line was abandoned. And like so many other small towns across America, Elroy was dealt a major blow.
Population went from 2,200 at the turn of the century to now down around 1,500.
To draw people back to Elroy, a local politician named Alan Thompson had an idea.
My father was very much a visionary, always looking for something to promote Elroy. And he said, well, with the trains gone, maybe we should turn that into a bicycle trail. So he took it up with the county board, they took it up with the Department of Natural Resources, and they came together with the decision that this would be a tremendous idea.
The 32-mile trail would run from Elroy to the town of Sparta, passing through 3 cavernous tunnels. Unlike the Illinois Prairie Path, this corridor was relatively rural, so the state could snatch up the entire stretch for a mere $12,000.
Well, the advantage is that you have one decision maker, the state, saying, we'll take this, we'll pay for it, and we'll operate it. We consider the Elroy-Sparta Trail sort of the first successful rail trail. The state bought it, they surfaced it with a nice crushed limestone surface.
And when you tell people the trail goes through 3 railroad tunnels, one is 3,800 feet, it's intriguing for people to come and see it and to ride it. I still think it's the greatest and most beautiful bicycle trail in America.
Slowly and steadily, a national Rails to Trails movement began to emerge. Its members were as diverse as they were passionate for the cause.
I was very involved in the women's movement for a decade, working for the Equal Rights Amendment, and we failed. We did not ratify that amendment. And I really felt such responsibility, and I needed to do something. And I really wanted to create a safe place for women to be physically active. And the trail was just the perfect answer to that.
I came at it really from the environmental movement. I was working on the bottle bill trying to get returnable bottles, and we lost that one along with the ERA. The nice thing about Rails to Trails is it's kind of recycling. And so let's recycle these railroads, which has been much more successful.
Not all cyclists were so gung-ho about trails. Many of them saw it as another strategy to displace cyclists from the street. And if you have a trail, then we're going to be kicked off the road, and so we're not going to support that.
But the wheels of change were already in motion. By 1968, there were about 30 rail trails across the country.
Suddenly, the people that are scared of riding in the road said, hey, this would be great for us. And then even the people that preferred to ride on the road said, okay, well, you guys can have your railroad corridor, and we'll use it too, but we'll still ride on the road. And the word just started quietly spreading around the country among bicyclists. Wow, you mean there's this long trail that has no cars on it?
But not everyone was on board.
I'm not against the trails. I'm just against how they took the land without doing it like they should have done.
Dick Welsh has been fighting rail trail efforts for 4 decades.
The federal government, they can actually take property without appropriating money for it.
His battles began in 1969, when Welsh and his wife built a house outside Seattle on Lake Sammamish, where an occasional freight train chugged through their yard.
We built a dock, and we walked across the track all the time, and you knew about when the trains were coming anyway. We never had any bother with it. I mean, in fact, it was kind of something different.
Though the train tracks weren't a bother, the threat of their abandonment was. Welsh saw that as rail corridors were abandoned, adjacent property owners were fighting to keep what they felt was their land.
Well, I've always been into property rights to a certain extent. You buy a piece of property, you don't go back and read through the whole abstract and see what all the deeds said. I don't think very many people do that. Now, I did.
Looking at old property records, Welsh contended that the railroads only had an easement, allowing them to pass through private property.
If you looked at our deed, it says, subject to a railroad right-of-way. That's why everybody thought that they would get the land back once the railroad quit.
To fight back, Welsh formed the National Association of Reversionary Property Owners. The group's private property claims were an affront to rail trail advocates.
Though the railroads were built often by private companies, they were subsidized by tremendous public and federal investment, and ultimately in corridors that were built on public land spanning the country. So I think the idea of turning them into trails is a very elegant way of continuing those basic principles, that this is public investment on public land for essentially a whole new form of infrastructure.
As legal challenges mounted, it threatened to stop the Rails to Trails movement dead in its tracks. But 20 miles northwest of Dick Welsh's home, another effort was heating up, which would prove that the movement was here to stay.
My husband and I, our property was the one that immediately abutted the railroad track. So we'd gotten a letter from Burlington Northern that indicated they were going to abandon the line.
In the summer of 1970, a group of friends and neighbors in Seattle gathered to discuss.
I don't know whether you said it first or I said it first.
I don't remember either.
We looked at each other and I think we both said, let's make a trail. And the whole group immediately was on board.
Yes.
So I was very pregnant, and I didn't know what I could do to help with the trail, but I thought I could go to the library. I discovered that those rails were laid in 1885.
A century earlier, Seattleites had donated land for the railroad to ensure that their city would become an economic powerhouse.
People donated it for the purpose of Seattle being the Queen City. And now, once again, donating property to the city for the trail would also be good for the city.
They decided to call it the Burke-Gilman Trail for the 2 businessmen who brought the railroad to town. They went door to door, hoping to get the buy-in of every neighbor along the tracks with handmade brochures. At an environmental fair that winter, they cornered the mayor.
He's 10 feet or so from me, and all of a sudden I knew what to do. Pull the baby out. And so, of course, he stopped and he said, "Who's this?" And out of my mouth came a little girl that needs a bicycle trail.
The mayor volunteered to rally the community with a hike-in along the tracks.
The rally got so much publicity. I mean, it really put us on the map.
Some of the radio stations came to the rally, and one of them walked up to me. He said, "So I'm going to organize a real opposition group. What do you say?"
It seems the Trail Committee weren't the only ones who saw the value of this slice of Seattle. The Burlington Northern Railroad wanted to sell it and reap a profit. Adjacent property owners wanted it for themselves.
We didn't know if the city would fund the trail, but the right-of-way was so valuable, you could not replace it.
The trail advocates had to move quickly. Hoping to take the corridor off the market, they convinced the federal government to reconsider the railroad's abandonment.
It legally stopped them from immediately selling the land.
Yeah.
And then the mayor and the county then could negotiate.
The case set an important legal precedent. From now on, when a rail corridor was abandoned, public agencies and civic groups would be given the first opportunity to buy it, so they could use it as parkland.
Not only paved the way for us, but it set a national precedent and opened the door to a whole bunch of subsequent rail to trail conversions.
And then so we made new law.
Right.
Thanks to its big city setting, the Burke-Gilman brought national attention to rail trails. The movement was even starting to turn heads in the nation's capital.
The current situation on the Rock Island Railroad line is symptomatic of the problems that confront the entire United States rail industry.
For Congress, rail trails were an elegant solution to a vexing problem. As railroads continued to go under, their unused tracks scarred the American landscape. So in 1977, the federal government set aside $5 million to help communities turn them into trails.
They got 130 applicants from around the country. Everybody was stunned. 130 different communities are actually thinking about this. They found 9 really strong project possibilities, and all 9 of them became trails. It really raised the level of the movement tremendously.
One was right in Congress's backyard. The Washington and Old Dominion Trail, or W&OD, became a playground for DC power brokers.
When we would go to Congress and say, we're working on rails to trails, and they go, rails to trails.
Or whales to snails, or right?
What are you talking about? And then we'd say, like the W&OD. And they'd say, oh, I love the W&OD.
I had a love of running. I really like to run.
A young government lawyer was among those in Washington who saw the potential for rail trails.
I couldn't cross this black bridge up here because of the railroad tracks.
His fateful encounter with a lightly used railroad would prove to be a pivotal moment.
If that were a trail, I could have run home.
As a lawyer, he knew that if the train ever stopped running, the corridor would be broken up into private parcels.
Railroads are bought for railway purposes. And if you abandon the railroad, it reverts back to the guy that originally owned it.
That got him thinking. What if there was some way to preserve the right-of-way by saving a corridor in some sort of bank?
So my thought was, when the railroad is through, the Rails to Trails community or a state or local body comes in, assumes all the liability, pays all the taxes.
He sat down to write a bill, which would become the Rails to Trails movement's secret weapon.
In the case of interim use of any established railroad rights-of-way pursuant to donation, transfer, lease, sale, the reason it's long is that I didn't want anybody to read to the end. A lot of people pay a lot of money to a lobbyist to write what I wrote.
Members of Congress who did read the entire bill understood that the corridor was in the bank so that a railroad could someday use it again. Its use as a trail was legally only temporary.
It was to hold the right-of-way for the future so that the high-speed rail or whoever could come back and build the right-of-way into a railroad again.
In March of 1983, Ronald Reagan signed rail banking into law. It was roundly condemned by rail trail opponents.
Rail banking
was just a disguise to steal property. They legalized the theft of our property.
Soon after rail banking took effect, Missouri farmers waged one of a series of legal battles that would make it to the highest court in the land. It all began in 1986, when Jane and Morris Glosmeyer learned that the tracks running through their farm were set to become the longest rail trail in the country.
We were never asked if we wanted the trail to go through our property. We read about a proposed trail in the sports section of the St. Louis paper, and they just assumed they could walk right over our rights.
They found out that in order to build the Katy Trail, the corridor had been rail banked, and that flew in the face of the Glosmeyers' assumption that if the railroad went under, the land would be theirs.
Our easement said, for the purpose of a railroad and no other purpose. That's about as clear cut as you can get.
Agriculture, it's in your blood. You want to pass it to your children, and you don't want to pass something hindrance to your children. You want it to be cut, dried, clear. They can farm it, they can take care of it as they were meant to take care of it.
And so the Glosmeyers and 143 of their neighbors went to court, challenging the very constitutionality of rail banking.
Fighting the U.S. government is a scary concept, but we were trying to preserve our constitutional right to own property that no one could just take it from us.
But their case wasn't the only one working its way through the courts.
You can see all the old industrial fixtures still. This was a huge tank farm.
Thanks in no small part to the U.S. Supreme Court, Burlington, Vermont's waterfront is a cyclist's paradise. But back when Howard Dean was a young doctor, it was a different story.
It was a dump. There was trash, there was bricks, there was construction debris. It was a disaster.
Then in 1980, real estate developers came knocking.
And it was about to go into developers' hands and have 10-story condos put on it, and we were just appalled. The public was going to be denied access to what we saw as an unbelievable asset. I come from eastern Long Island, and I grew up in what was a very rural place. I can remember riding my bike through potato fields, wild blueberries. I saw that all get run over and disappear. I didn't want that to happen in Vermont.
So the future governor decided to make his first foray into politics. He and local lawyer Rick Sharp set out to stop the waterfront condos and fight for a bike path instead.
You gotta remember the mentality of the 1980s. Yuppie was to have a condominium right on the lake with nobody going by in front, spoiling their view. We felt that the bike path should not be an afterthought in a transportation corridor. Instead, it should be up front.
I never thought of the bike path as political. It was community organizing, contacting the legislatures, getting into the press, going on the radio, having meetings every 3 weeks, local newsletters, which is really important.
Soon the group had built enough support to make their case to Burlington's socialist new mayor. But Bernie Sanders wasn't on board with their plan, claiming it would cost taxpayers too much.
He had cut a deal with a developer that you could develop the condos, these 2 big condo towers, but we were having none of it.
The grassroots group kept the pressure on.
I get this phone call, and it's Bernie. Howard, in 5 minutes, I'm going to announce $750,000 bond issue to build a bike path, and you can tell your friend, Mr. Sharp. Bang! The frank truth of this is grassroots pressure pushed Bernie into doing this. However, there was a guy in the North End who had a big development of condos, and he sued.
Just when it seemed the path would be built, a neighbor threatened to stop it.
Paul is a very private guy. He didn't like the idea of bicycles going by the back door of his luxury condominiums.
Airline pilot Paul Priso claimed the land was his.
He owned both sides of the railroad right away. He claimed that when it was abandoned, it reverted back to him.
And so, like the Glosmeyers, Priso challenged the constitutionality of rail banking. He even resorted to sabotage.
He began putting things in the right of way. So he started with a big dumpster over here, and they made him take that out, and then some rebar. The unfortunate thing for us was that he laid a log right across the pathway here.
As Priso's case made its way toward the U.S. Supreme Court, the Rails to Trails movement was at a crossroads. Legal challenges were mounting, and abandoned corridors were being gobbled up by private interests. It was clear to advocates they needed to organize.
David Burwell, who had a long history of trying to find alternatives to automobiles, was actually working for the National Wildlife Federation at the time. He was getting calls saying, you've got to save these abandoned railroad corridors in South Dakota because they're the only place where the pheasants can breed. And if you don't save these corridors, then we won't have any pheasants to shoot. David wasn't really a hunter, but he was thinking, maybe this needs its own group. And that's how things got off the ground.
In 1986, the Rails to Trails Conservancy opened its doors. It got to work searching for abandoned corridors and building coalitions to convert them.
My first job at Rails to Trails Conservancy was to literally assess what was out there, what was abandoned, what was still active, what was possible, who were the trail advocates, who were the government officials that were interested.
And that's what this organization did, is it took a great idea, a lot of energy in different places, and really coalesced a whole movement.
The organization was in its infancy when it was handed a major victory. In the Vermont case, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of rail banking. The Conservancy could now use this tool to convert corridors in every corner of the country.
We were in the office when we got word, and it's like, we won. We won? Oh my gosh, we won.
While the court ruled that property owners could be compensated for their losses, the case was a serious blow to opponents.
By then I knew that there was no way to stop the trail. The politics was against us, so we sold out and moved. I didn't want to live near a trail.
In Vermont, the victory cleared the way for completion of the 14-mile Island Line Trail. It extends onto a causeway in Lake Champlain, where cyclists can catch a bike ferry to the Champlain Islands.
It certainly had a really big effect on Burlington, Vermont. Not only do our locals use it regularly, it's the #1 attraction for the city of Burlington.
Working with grassroots organizers from coast to coast, the Rails to Trails Conservancy built out the nation's trail network. In 1990, they saw an opportunity in Atlanta.
A railroad circle on a 2-mile radius. And so the recommendation of the report was this will be abandoned, and the charge to the city of Atlanta is to catch every piece of it as it gets abandoned and turn it into trail.
A Georgia Tech graduate student named Ryan Gravel crafted a plan for the old rail loop. He called it the Beltline. It would eventually include a 22-mile trail alongside a light rail line, connecting the people of Atlanta to new housing, retail, and parks.
He got a chance to travel to Europe and noticed that, man, people are getting around the city without having to get in a car. Why can't we do that in Atlanta? Atlanta is a cool place to be, but what is our Achilles tendon? It's traffic.
But how to pay for it? City leaders knew that amenities like a trail and transit would eventually attract higher-priced real estate development. So the city designated a special tax district, which would capture rising revenue along the Beltline.
And then what the Beltline does is to clean it up environmentally, recruit new companies and businesses to locate there. And so as the taxes grow, we essentially get a small portion of that new value that's been created. Not everyone really believed in that concept. The number of people said, this is a boondoggle. Why would we put public resources into this glorified sidewalk?
Atlanta took a leap of faith, and it paid off in spades.
We've invested about $800 million into the Beltline but we've seen over $9 billion of private investment that has followed this public infrastructure here.
The politics of building rail trails was increasingly focused on the fight for funding. And advocates were once again calling on Congress.
The federal government has a lot to say about transportation routes. So let's get people healthy, let's get people back biking.
What creates the mind shift is when Congress people perceive the benefits. My constituents can save a lot of money if they can walk and bike and not have to be maintaining a car. Some people said there should not be a federal role in funding for walking and biking facilities. But back when it was left to state and local, we had almost no facilities. It's only when the federal money started acting as a catalyst.
In 1991, rail trail advocates hit the jackpot. For decades, they had been hamstrung by laws that funded transportation through gas taxes. Gas-free ways of getting around were often left out of the equation.
In fact, a lot of state departments that we now call transportation departments used to be known as the highway department. We got into this mode as a country where it was as if highways are the only form of transportation that matters.
Then, transit activists finally forced Congress to break with the past. The president signed a transformative bill with a wonky name, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act, or ICE-T.
The key word and the key concept in this bill is intermodal. This is the first time in the history of transportation legislation that one bill brings together the several modes by which we move people and goods in this country.
The law set aside more than $2 billion for non-auto projects like trails and bike lanes.
They've gradually taken back some of the lane space that they had given to cars over all those years and made it available to bikes. This would have been completely unimaginable when I was a kid in New York. But it's still more pleasant to be on a rail trail.
Rail trails were about to enter a golden age, and a gritty New York neighborhood would become the movement's unlikely epicenter.
I moved into an apartment on 10th and Washington in '93, and I moved in there because it was cheap, because no one wanted to walk over this far. I mean, it was busier at 2 in the morning than it was at 2 in the afternoon because there were a whole bunch of gay clubs. And the reason the gay clubs were up there is because no one else was up there. To me, when I first saw that there was a train that used to run in here, you know, it was romantic. The reality was it was not romantic. You didn't live on the wrong side of the tracks, you lived under the tracks. And then after it was abandoned in 1980, everyone just assumed it was coming down.
In 1999, Hammond picked up the New York Times and found that the day had come. The West Side Elevated Line was slated for demolition.
What surprised me when I saw the article was that it was 1.5 miles and it was continuous. It's 1.5 miles of Manhattan. How often do you get 1.5 miles of Manhattan?
Though he had no idea what should become of the elevated line, he was convinced it should be saved. At a community meeting, he met a kindred spirit named Joshua David. The two decided to lead a campaign to save the High Line.
We didn't come up with a name, but we realized that's a great name. But I was a history major working in .com marketing. Josh was a travel writer. We don't have a vision for this. I mean, there was thought about, do you put housing on it? Do you put a trolley up here? But we quickly learned to talk less and show more pictures of the High Line. People fell in love with those photos. And so people over time said, like, this is sort of what we want. We want this natural landscape.
But days before leaving office, Mayor Rudy Giuliani signed a demolition order.
I don't think Mayor Giuliani cared about the High Line either way, but it was like how things work in New York. The real estate lobby is very powerful. They lobbied for him to tear it down.
It was an unlikely time for New Yorkers to embrace an ambitious project.
I mean, we had 9/11 to deal with. Who's going to care about the High Line when this is happening? I mean, people were saying, there goes the city. much less this weird preservation project that had no funding and no real plan. But what happened was it actually galvanized support for the High Line. It became a symbol of hope and optimism for New York.
The new mayor, Michael Bloomberg, reversed Giuliani's demolition order, and plans emerged for a different kind of rail trail. On the High Line, bikes and roller skates would be banned, and the design would take center stage.
We said, if we're going to do this, we don't want to just put up a stair, put up a bench and a walkway. We want to do something really special.
There was many sort of fantastical proposals, from housing to the 1.5 mile long lap pool to roller coasters. We really wanted to keep it wild, keep it quiet, keep it slow. It was meant to be a place for exploration, discovery, wonder. Traditionally, parks were seen as an escape from the city. And the High Line was really about this moment to celebrate and showcase the city and have this dialogue with it.
The High Line would be the only rail trail in the country that you might get dressed up to actually walk on. Nobody would dress up to go on their regular rail trail.
I don't think we, beyond our wildest dreams, imagined its popularity and the sort of spin-off effect and how it would begin to influence and impact other projects, all over the region and the world.
As other cities sought to replicate the High Line's success, many stumbled into the project's pitfalls.
It's sparked a conversation around gentrification and displacement. Displacement is the issue that you want to prevent.
While flashy urban rail trails tend to spur high-priced real estate development, longtime residents don't typically share the wealth. In Atlanta, they've addressed the problem by setting aside some of the billions in new investment for affordable housing.
There are many community leaders who are looking to create new green spaces to draw more value to that area. And that is not necessarily something that is to be avoided at all costs. It's more about who gets that value.
Well, I think the first step is always bring them to the space. I think people's imaginations run wild when they see something like this.
10 miles east of the High Line, they have yet to even break ground on the 3.5-mile Queensway. But they're already taking steps to make sure the community will benefit by simply asking them what they want.
So the specificity that you're asking about, that's still being worked on now.
How is it going to affect me? That's usually what you hear from folks.
We would love to have you at a PTA meeting. Yeah. We would love to come. So we've been in touch.
We want that feedback before we even get to constructing any of this. That's the point of having that engagement.
In 2019, the Rails to Trails movement entered a new era.
Peter had this big map on a bulletin board in his wall and popped a pin in it for every completed rail trail in the country.
Green was complete. Blue was underway.
I was standing in his office and could see that there was a line all across the country developing.
Now the Rails to Trails Conservancy would set out to complete the Great American Rail Trail, spanning 3,700 miles from Washington, D.C. to Washington State.
You think about how many people benefit. There are 50 million people that live within 50 miles of the trail. It truly is an iconic piece of infrastructure.
I envision a time when every young person in America, that'll be part of their rite of passage to adulthood. They will ride the Great American Rail Trail across their country.
I'm coming up on 1,000 miles, and that's from the Capitol building in D.C.
Mike Kohler is riding the Great American Rail Trail as part of an outdoor therapy program for military veterans.
I think it's a lot of reflection time when veterans get out in the middle of nowhere, completely isolated in some spots. Days like this, I'm glad to be out here right now.
There are still more than 1,600 miles of gaps in the trail where travelers can be temporarily routed onto roads.
I wish it went all the way through. But from my understanding, there's more and more people all the time who are trying to get it built and connected.
Gradual slope. From this stake to the left stake is the center line of the proposed trail. Right. And then as we get to that bank.
An hour north of Indianapolis, the Miami Central will bridge one of those gaps in the cross-country trail.
Does this proposed line here, can it come to the other side of this tree?
In order to build the 3,700-mile trail, it's going to take countless conversations like this one with neighbors across the country.
No way. I do not want to lose that much property to the curve.
But that's the outside edge. The pavement will be. When I talk to folks at conferences at other states, we all have the same issues. You know, they're not in my backyard. You know, hey, I want a trail, but I don't want it near me. But once we have asphalt go down, and once they see kids and families start to hike on it, the fear goes away.
Yeah, I think we're 95% in agreement. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you.
This is the latest chapter in a 60-year political saga. Just as they did in the early days of the Rails to Trails movement, advocates are continuing to organize, negotiate, and fight 1 mile at a time. They do this work because they believe that by building trails, they are also building stronger communities.
There are a lot of challenges out there. I mean, you talk about the environment, you talk about physical and mental health challenges, disparities and opportunities, but I'm really optimistic about the Trails Movement ability to be a big part of those solutions.
It's very gratifying to look at the total amount of investment we have in trails and what that has given us and what's given the American people.
Hello, how are you?
Good morning.
There's a form of civility and connection that people demonstrate on trails that I don't see almost anywhere else.
Hi, guys.
To be out on a trail and to pass almost everyone with a wave and a smile. You just don't experience that in other venues in America. You get out from behind a windshield, and there's just a different connection.
This kind of enterprise spans an entire lifetime, from little kids learning to ride with their training wheels all the way up to people who need walkers or even wheelchairs. I've done 207 rail trails, and it'd be nice to get to 250. If it ever happens that I end up in a wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair, I'm still going out on rail trails.
That is the documentary that I think is just really neat. And I thought that a good little conversation piece afterward would be to show some of the rail lines that we have in our region. So we have some GIS layers internally that are of yeah, I'm also the person here who works on freight stuff. These aren't 100% reliable, especially the abandoned rail lines. You can see on this map, all the red lines are kind of small, so that could be a little bigger, but the red lines are supposedly abandoned rail lines, and the green are active rail lines. And you know, there's some sections of this that have already been converted into trails. The Mohawk Hudson section of the Empire State Trail, for example, you can see on that map is a trail now. The Helderberg Hudson Trail from Albany out to Del Mar. Some sections of the Zim Smith Trail even have been built. And there's still a lot of red on that map that has not been touched. There are sections of this that say they're abandoned, but still, you know, the layer that this comes from is pretty outdated. So some of these do, once again, have some limited rail on them, but many of them are still abandoned. Some are so old and abandoned, there's hardly a trace of them anymore. Some of them were abandoned and then purchased by utilities and are now National Grid right-of-way. And as all of us who work in planning, transportation planning here know that the utilities and the railroads are two of the most difficult entities to work with. But given our recent, you know, kind of opening the door with National Grid, you know, hope is certainly not lost, especially with the increase in rail banking as well, nationwide, as the documentary talked about. It's possible for us to make it a little more palatable for railroads to be comfortable allowing trails to be installed. And what I've heard is that nationwide, there's only been a handful of rail banked trails that have been approached by the railroad again to say, we'd like to put train service back. And usually at that point, the trail is so popular that the railroad is willing to work with the trail maintainers and do a rail and trail project. Like the Atlanta Beltline that was shown in the documentary, part of the project was always intended to have light rail service along with the trail. And so now that the city of Atlanta is starting to pursue that light rail option, there's a lot of pushback from folks who are using the trail saying, no, we need to maintain some amount of trail here because, it's so popular. And so now the pressure is on the city to maintain the trail even as they're re-implementing that light rail service. So I just thought it was very interesting. If anyone has thoughts on it.
Let me comment on this. Waldo Nielsen had found his way to me as I was the bike commuter in at DPW, which became DOT. And he was convincing. Later on, a guy called Lou Rossi, who remained with DOT, joined me as proponents. The state had implemented legislation where DOT would be allowed to review the ICC abandonment proceedings and assign the first dibs at buying the railroad right away for various reasons. Sometimes for bike trails, sometimes for other trails. Okay, that's still exists. And when some of the rail lines are abandoned, then from my recollection, DOT tries to get to that as the rails themselves are being abandoned, not the right of way, the rails themselves. It becomes very difficult for a transportation agency to then hop in and say, this will make a marvelous rail trail and just continue and abandon the rail part of it, because then you have a whole batch of people that are being benefited by the rail service, even if it's just for movement of bulk cargo. So that's a difficult issue. I'll leave to you and others here, but be a little bit careful, because the rail companies will be the first to say we can sell this thing now, and we're all for a bike trail. So that's a side issue. Once it's assigned to the agency and you get the rights of way, you can deal with the rail company, and chances are you're dealing for a quit claim deed. So you're dealing for the rights to run a railroad, essentially. And the railroad gives that up. And then you have to deal with all these landowners, all their problems. They mentioned the issue of the large farm. Well, we have many of those, particularly in Washington County, for example, near here, and other places in Western New York. Farmers came out and dumped manure on the right of way after you had cleaned it up and put the brush around stone dust surface in. So those have been resolved, but that is part of the issue, but other parts of the issue is they have strange easements that are included in their deeds. These include easements to get to the water for the purpose of watering cattle along the lake. What do you do with one of those things? What does it mean to a farmer that has a dozen cows? To get to the post road is a typical issue. So they have to be allowed a right of way, a clear road within that requirement. Last but not least, and it's a big problem, maintaining these rights of way is alone a big issue. I mentioned culverts before, there are many of them. Drainage is a big issue, and it has to be resolved to who does it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that it has to be resolved, otherwise you will have a rail right of way that you have built up, and it has been cut apart by the first flood. So it's a work unto itself.
Definitely.
I proudly say that when we were at state parks, starting with state plans, we had put together enough that it became about 2/3 of the Empire State Trail at this point.
Yeah.
And in this place, for example, the Crescent Branch piece in Cohoes is one of those that can revert to rail use. What happens then? So it remains an issue. And I'm all for them, but
Yeah, it's definitely complicated to convert any of these rail lines.
it's complicated, but it's well worthwhile. I'm delighted to see that at least half of the recently half of the Remsen Lake Placid right of way, which we began arguing about in 1980, is finally open. The other half, a recreational rail system is running, and some of those are going enterprises able to, in fact, take bicycles as part of their service. However, in other places like the Battenkill Railroad into Washington County, they go under, they come back, they ask for transportation agencies to help them rebuild the system. They are not a very dependable transportation service. There are people playing railroad. End of my comments, sorry.
No, really appreciate those thoughts.
I'd say, yeah, I'm always continually pleased to have your history with the state and the developments, and really without your work and others with DOT and parks, we wouldn't have the basis for the rail trails that we have in New York. So thanks, Ivan.
Well, it's worth doing.
Yeah.
We use it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, my wife too is in a walker or in a wheelchair, and we will look for these surfaces that are easy to walk on or be pushed on. it's service for every, oh, one more thing I have to add. The DNA trail right away through Cohoes that goes into Waterford. That trail at that time, that right of way at that time was built up on a causeway that went through the municipality. It was a wall of China. We had bought the right of way, but then we had to open it up in such a way as the right of way remains, but that wall of China was taken away, and that Waterford was allowed to connect up all the local streets. So sometimes you can do good things for the neighborhood you run through.
Yeah, it's important that as these trails are developed, everyone's considered, including vehicle users, because oftentimes rail right of way in particular can be a big impediment even to cars.
And you're connecting up local streets that have always butted up and couldn't get from one end to the other.
Yeah, trail work, I think it can feel disheartening at times, because it's very difficult, especially in areas like this that are very built up in every aspect. So it's always nice to see ongoing efforts and hear success stories and help and keep us and the people that we work with involved and engaged and passionate about building these projects. That documentary, by the way, is free online on PBS's website. It's just called From Rails to Trails. So if you ever want to share it with someone, it's available there. I'll include the link in the meeting minutes.
I'm surprised how comprehensive it is.
Yeah. And it's very new. I think it came out in 2025.
And I'm surprised I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, what? Wouldn't you expect to see it on PBS?
Yeah, you would. Yeah, I only heard about it, because like I said, it was at the Greenways conference that I attended in October. They screened it. So yeah, it's very interesting documentary. So
yeah,
that's all I have for this meeting. I want to thank everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And spending some time with us
See you
today.
next meeting.
Yep, see you in April.
On the agenda.
Thanks, Ethan.
Yep. Thanks everyone online.